Hello Shapers, welcome to the another exciting episode of Coffee with Curators. Our today's guest curator is from one of the city of United States. She is a climate leader who works to support regenerative loving communities and landscapes through technical consulting, community engagement, ecological restoration, group facilitation, and biomimicry design thinking. She pursues her passion through her current role as a Northeast Ohio strategy consultant at Power a Clean Future Ohio, co-founder and technical lead at Sustainability and Environment for Citadel Impact Consulting. She is a polymer and material science engineer by trade and is currently finishing her PhD in integrated bioscience and biomimicry. It's my pleasure to welcome the curator of Cleveland Hub from USA, Elena Stachew. Welcome, Elena, to the Coffee with Curators.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
So, for our community, meetup events are most important for shapers and hubs to gain better understanding of community and to promote cross-hub collaboration. The Global Shapers community conduct events like annual curators meeting, shape events. Additionally, many hubs organize regional meetups to provide opportunities for shapers to build social and professional connections with fellow shapers in the region. Next month, the Cleveland Hub is going to host a Midwest Meetup. Elena, could you please share or give us a brief overview of the event?
Yeah, sure. Cleveland Hub's very excited to welcome any and all shapers to Midwest Meetup. It's in Cleveland from April 28th through 30th. So you can come in anytime, Friday. Some shapers are actually showing up a few days early, which is totally fine. We'll host you as Cleveland Shapers. And yeah, so it's Friday evening through Sunday afternoon, and we have a couple objectives. One is obviously for our shapers to meet each other and network professionally and personally, but also we know a lot of hubs have suffered with engagement during the height of the pandemic. So we're hoping to spend some time on hub engagement and capacity building and doing that through cross-hub collaboration and thinking about projects hubs can do together, as well as exploring 3 tracks, activity tracks. So there'll be some capacity building built into those, as well as projects, and just learning from other organizations in Cleveland about sustainability, environment and climate justice, civic engagement, specifically with a focus in public health, and the future of work. So what Cleveland Hub's done in the past is we've partnered with organizations and done a project in collaboration with them. So we're hoping to show that process to all the shapers during these tracks as a way to start on a project, even if it's a small lift, but you're helping an organization in your community move their work along. And then of course, lots of fun built in. So we'll go to a theater for a performance. We'll go to some breweries. Cleveland loves their breweries. We're a big beer drinking city. Some dancing. Check out our like club scene at night. But also we'll actually be wrapping up 2 of our projects, and we want to do it with shapers and community. Saturday night, we're hosting an environmental justice like reception, like an advocacy reception, because we've been working on 2 projects and with Ohio Climate Justice Fund funding, which is statewide funding, as well as an online education media campaign with a group called Freshwater Cleveland. So we'll be talking about that later, but we've been doing both YouTube panels and articles. And so we're concluding that series Saturday night and inviting all of our panelists and organizational partners to meet you all and just network and have fun. So yeah, we're excited to show off Cleveland and just meet everyone. It'll be fun.
So shapers, don't miss this fabulous opportunity because as we know, annual curator meeting is only for the curators. In shape event also there is a restriction for the shapers. Every shaper can't attend the shape event, but such regional events will help you to like know community in better way and to understand what is the potential of the community. So Elena, you have been working with the global shapers community for more than 6 years now. Could you walk us through your journey as a global shaper and also please share your major takeaways from your journey?
Sure. So I joined September 2017, and Our hub has been around since 2013. So I believe the community officially started in 2011. Cleveland Hub started in 2013. So we're a pretty old hub in the global shapers world, but it did take the hub a while to get a sense of what we could do. Cleveland's one of those cities where we have Cleveland and the larger region in general has the most concentrated nonprofits in the country in the United States. So there's a lot of nonprofit and mission-based organizations already doing great work. So we didn't want to duplicate work. We didn't want to take away resources from existing organizations. So it was a little bit difficult for us to find our place, I think the first couple of years. But when I joined, there was a real strong cohort of like 8 or 9 of us that came in 2017. And we just started to explore whatever, project passion areas the shapers wanted to do. So we did some food insecurity research, human-centered design research, like understanding that landscape. We hosted some community conversations with a foundation that does a community conversation series in the summer. We hosted a circular design workshop using that like Ellen MacArthur Foundation materials, which I know has been a Global Shapers community partner for quite a while. And then when we started to just like onboard more shapers and have more of like a culture developed and having our annual hub retreat, we started to do these project sprints, which were really great. So we would partner with an organization and figure out what they needed. So in a sense, it's like pro bono consulting, but it would be a 6 to 8 week project that was very defined in terms of what the objective was. And we could split into teams and have a little bit of like fun competition. So one of the projects I joined was with Rust Belt Riders, which is our community composter. And we were helping them figure out where they should place drop-off bins throughout the community so you could drop off your compost. Like, where's the best place to put them? As well as like, how can they tell the bins are heavy enough, like full of food waste, and when should they come pick them up, like optimize their routes? So we had 2 teams with 2 fun names working on different aspects of that challenge. And we presented to Rust Belt Riders and they got to vote on their best team, just to have a little camaraderie, a little fun, a little competition. So that was really cool. Then we did this amazing project with the Fair Housing Center working on alternative tenant screening models. So there's an issue of affordable housing in the United States, and of course that's all across the world. And a lot of that has to do with like how how potential tenants are screened. So it'll be things like credit scores and background checks, and that doesn't necessarily dictate that they can pay rent each month. And so that gives some residents only access to subpar housing. So we were exploring different models for screening tenants and affordable housing models. We did like a local competition. So that was really fun. So all of that is to say that the Cleveland Hub's always worked really intentionally within the community and found existing partners. And we've really focused on developing an inclusive, friendly culture. We're a smaller city of like 360,000, though the whole metro area is 1.5 million. So we recruit from that whole area because we're the largest city in that area. And then yeah, we're all of us are friends. There's usually only about 20 of us at any given point because we have a lot of people move in and out for jobs in different cities. So it's just been like great because I've made friends since 2017 onward and maintained friendships even if they quote unquote aged out from the hub. And a couple of specific experiences I've had apart from just being involved in the Cleveland Hub has been early on, I got to co-design a course on biomimicry and architecture with a shaper in Karachi, Pakistan. So that was very cool. I did like remote coursework design and assistance with the shaper there. So that was one of my first like international kind of cross collaborations, which was really cool. And then when I went to Israel for a week for a water technology exchange program between Ohio and Israel, I spent my next week in Jordan with who's now the curator of Amman Hub, Saddam Saleh. He's one of my closest friends because he actually was here in Cleveland for a fellowship several years ago. So we met everyone in the Cleveland Hub and we stayed connected. So I got to spend a week with him in Jordan. So like those travel experiences have been great. And then I was selected to participate in the first United Nations Youth Climate Summit back in September 2019. So I was there for all the climate strikes. And then I got to meet a lot of shapers and just amazing young people at the United Nations. And that's actually really, that experience catalyzed a lot of our work, which we'll talk about. I came back from that trip, we're like really energized. So a lot of our work pivoted to climate and environmental justice from that point forward, and pivoted again because of the pandemic. But that experience really shifted the direction of our hub in a substantial way and in a positive way. So I think those are the main highlights. I don't know. I don't know if Random Shaper still exists. I can't remember, but like that one where you get paired with the shaper monthly or weekly and you can do like a Skype call. That has
Hmm.
been amazing. I did that on and off when I first started. I believe the hub that started that is still like running that program. I think it's just called something different. Um, but I've been able to make great connections for either traveling to meet them at some point for trips or like doing a project together at some point. So that's been really great. But yeah, I mean, I've loved my journey as a shaper. I've loved it. One will continue to love it.
So if I ask you the best things about the Qland hub, or the what is the main strength of the Qland hub, what will you like say?
Cleveland Hub, we're small and mighty. Like I said, we're always hovering right around 20. Been trying to get to 30 for the last several years, and just stay consistently at 30. But we have a lot of people move in and out of the city. And but we're really close knit. We're all friends. We all like to hang out socially outside of doing hub projects. And Cleveland's one of these big cities with a small town feel in general. So when you come to Cleveland and you're here for a while, I mean, there's a lot to do. Like I said, 1.5 million people in the region. We've got lots of, just like any other city, lots of cool things to do. But it's you, when you're here for a while, you just run into people that eventually know everyone you know. So it's like, oh, my coworker from my job 3 years ago, or oh, my aunt, or so it's just like it's amazing how many like quote unquote small town connections there are, and just Cleveland itself is just a very friendly city. So that reflects those strengths of the city reflect itself in the Cleveland hub, I'd say. Um, and what's great about our hub is we try really hard to balance different strengths. So we have folks that are more on the, you could say, extroverted side, that go out and talk to community partners and recruit shapers and just like to be out and be social. But then we've got those that, I mean, maybe that's not their cup of tea, but they do a lot of great like research, and they do calls with community partners, and they really dig into what's the most impact we can have. So we have strengths across the board, which I think has helped us maintain long-term community partnerships.
Mhm.
Um, for several years now. Like we've been running some projects for several years, and yeah, just develops trust within the community. Like it's taken a while, but more and more organizations in our city landscape know who we are. So that's great, and we're getting asked to be part of more panels or boards of organizations or speaking engagements. So that's been really great to see. Um, all the hard work that we've put in establishing trust with the community, and also just establishing trust with each other, and how that, you know, manifests years down the road. So that's been great.
Yeah, great. So while preparing for this episode, I went to the Qland Hub's YouTube channel and
Mhm.
found a very interesting series on sustainability and the environment. Could you share some information about it, such as how it started and the different topics covered in the episodes and the guest featured, and what is the like idea behind it?
Yeah. So I will start to answer that question with a whole when I came back from the UN climate forum, because that's what really kicked off a lot of this work. So when I was in New York, I thought, oh, we could do something like this in Cleveland, like our own climate forum with like high school students and college students all across the region, because there are so many different communities in our in Cleveland and outside of Cleveland that really don't engage with one another. So our goal was, could we do a youth focused summit on a college campus here in Cleveland, like our own UN version? Well, the pandemic got in the way of that. So we had this great plan. We had a free venue on Case Western Reserve University's campus, which is my alumni or my alma mater university. And yeah, so we had to switch to virtual, which was, everyone had to do, but it worked out okay because we ended up on that YouTube channel. There is actually Youth Climate Future Forum panels from October of 2020. So we had recorded a lot of those conversations with our community partners, and it was really youth focused. So it was geared toward high school students. We made sure that our metropolitan school district or our city school district called CMSD, they could participate. So we worked with them to make sure classes could show up virtually. And we made sure that they were focused on like, okay, what is it the organization does? Like, what's their topic area, their issue, and like, how can young people get involved? Like, what does advocacy look like? So that's what a lot of those conversations focus on. And so that went really well. And then from that, we were like, okay, now that youth have been shown all these great organizations, let's give them the power to do, what they want to do. So we started a Youth Climate Action Fund. So we run a small grants program, and that means any high school student and college student can apply for funding through us. And we got that grant through, again, a community organization, like a philanthropic organization here. And we support a lot of like schools starting composting programs or trying to reduce just like plastic waste in their schools from like their cafeteria from lunches, or tree planting programs. But the idea is we're trying to encourage students to think about like a long-term systemic change in their school. So yes, they can plant trees, but can they develop like a landscape management plan with their grounds person to make sure that those trees actually survive in the long run? Like what sorts of water management practices can they practice on the campus? So we help them think a little bit more broadly past like a one-time event, and they get paired with a shaper mentor. And the hope is that because the recruiting age shifted from when I started to like 20 to 29 to now 18 to 27, we're trying to recruit more, high school graduates and high school seniors. So hopefully that project, brings those people to us, which actually has worked. We've had one apply from that like group of students, which is cool. And then from that, we were like, okay, now we want to do an educational campaign for the broader community. Like youth focus still, but like open it up to everyone. So we partnered with our fiscal sponsor. So we aren't a 501c3 as a hub, but we have a fiscal sponsor called Black Environmental Leaders Association, and Freshwater Cleveland, which is our online media series. And so we get to decide what the topics are, like what do we want to talk about in terms of environmental justice, because that's a broad term. So we focused on areas like air quality, waste, energy, land use, water, because we have one of the Great Lakes in our backyard. We have Lake Erie, so fresh water is very important to us. And transportation. So looking at transportation from like buses, trains, bikes, cars. And so we get to choose the panelists. So we get to find the organizations that we think best could contribute to the conversation, or those that are organizations that aren't featured as much in that space and we want to feature them, so amplify their work. We host these curated conversations, so all the shapers in the hub get a chance to facilitate a conversation, which is great. So they're all shaper run. And then we record it, so that's on our YouTube that you saw. So we've got both the climate forum from 2020. We did Shaping the Future in 2021, which is like a whole Global Shapers community-wide initiative. And then we shifted that Shaping the Future topic to environmental justice, which is what you're seeing from this year. And then Freshwater Cleveland writes articles. So if someone doesn't have the whole hour to listen, they can just listen, or they can read the summary article and get links to those organizations to get connected. So we're wrapping that up. So like I mentioned for Midwest Meetup, people can come celebrate the end of that project with us on Saturday night and meet all those great panelists. So
I will drop the link of the YouTube channel in the description box of this episode. The shapers, please go through it because it is very it will be very helpful for you to collaborate with the your collaborate or address your local problems of your communities. So, the most important part of the Global Shapers community is to drive the positive change in the communities through different projects and initiatives. Could you share the projects and initiatives of the Cleveland Ham and their impact areas?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, climate and environmental justice, environment in general is a big area for us. I mentioned the progression of projects really from like 2020 onward, and it's been really interesting because they really just like one kind of dovetails into another. So it's just like a project sort of morphed over time. So that's been really great because environmental justice is such a huge topic in the United States, and particularly in like Rust Belt cities, because they talk a lot about how communities like in the coasts, like California dealing with forest fires or hurricanes in Florida and flooding, that people will start to move to the Midwest. And the Midwest meaning like, the Midwest region, so all the hubs there, like Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, and all the states around the Great Lakes, because the Great Lakes are kind of a buffer in terms of buffering climate impacts. And so there's just a lot of conversation in cities in this area about, okay, how do we make sure we're addressing the concerns of our own citizens right now? Because we still struggle with that, given that there's just a lot of sprawl from when the city was a little much larger. So like our city had like over 1 million people at one point. So our infrastructure is built out for a much larger population than we have now. So taking care of our residents now, but then also projecting out, what if we could become that big again, or bigger than that? So that's a big like area of focus for our hub. But I did want to mention, before I forget, we have this really great series called Culture Clee, which is a restaurant series. So we invite Clevelanders to travel the world through cuisine in our city. We have restaurants and cuisine from all over the world. We're a really immigrant-friendly city in terms of just people from all walks of life in different parts of the world ending up in Cleveland. So what we do is we go to a restaurant during a low night, like a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday night, where they might not get a lot of customers. We bring people, they get to meet the owner, the chef, they learn how the restaurant was opened, they learn about the culture, some of the recipes, the spices that are used, and then the chef gets to walk through a curated dinner, and it's very shareable. So it's like family style, so people can meet each other. So we get to showcase a culture and a family restaurant in our city, but people get to try new food. And then it's actually raises money for us as a hub. So we've been wanting to say franchise this out. So it's called Culture Clee, but we've talked to the Pittsburgh hub and they're like, "Ooh, can we be Culture Pittsburgh?" Like, so we would love to talk to other hubs about starting something like that in their own cities, as well as even starting like a climate fund, like that small grants program, like I mentioned. Um,
Hmm.
so those would be the highlights that I would share.
Although you shared earlier, but to amplify the impact of the projects, collaboration with local bodies, government bodies, private companies, and NGOs are very important for the hub. How Cleveland Hub is working on it?
Yeah, so like I mentioned our project sprints before. So that's with a lot of nonprofit organizations or mission-based organizations. And we really try to identify ones that we know are doing a lot of great work, but maybe aren't being given as many opportunities for, say, funding or resources or to share their story. So we really try to do like kind of a landscape analysis, because again, there's so many nonprofits in the space on who it makes sense to partner with the most, and in which neighborhoods. Um, with for-profit companies, a lot of our shapers obviously work for for-profit companies. So if anything, we just engage them more on like fundraising purposes. So like to help with running events and, contributing funding to an event. And then local governments, a lot of our shapers are working, including myself and our Midwest Community Champion Kwame, work with local cities across Cuyahoga County and across Greater Cleveland to implement like equitable policies when it comes to affordable housing or energy efficiency retrofits or greenhouse gas emissions reductions. So we, in our own personal work, do a lot of that engagement in the area, But we also tell those cities about global shapers, because they sometimes have youth councils or mayors' youth councils. And so trying to, again, bridge that gap of like opportunities young people are already experiencing in the city in greater Cleveland, but sharing that once they're, say, done with that program, because it might only be a year or two, like appointment, that they then can, like their mayor could say, extend an invitation for them to join Shapers, so working out that kind of recruitment, long-term engagement of new members strategy. So that's sort of how we navigate all those different bodies in Cleveland.
Now, I don't think you will get any like problem for the government involvement because the your mayor is young global leader.
Yes, yeah, which is very exciting news. Yeah, he's a YGL this year.
So, Elena, you are a climate leader and you attended, as you mentioned earlier, 2019 UN Youth Climate Summit in New York City
Mhm.
and lead the Northeast Ohio Climate Future Forum, which helped you to start the Northeast Ohio Youth Climate Fund Action Fund, as you mentioned
Mhm.
earlier. So, as many shapers across the world want to work on climate issues, I believe your insights will be valuable for them. Could you please share your work experience on climate change and climate justice? And if any shaper want to like start working in this field, how they can start?
Yeah. So I would say that our partnership with the Climate Reality Project is great. So I had actually participated in one of their trainings for the first time in October last year in Houston. So I did a Power Up advocacy training. So I mean, that's a great place for Shaper to start, is to participate in one of the Climate Reality Project offerings. So whether that's the incubator program to like work on a project for your hub, or to participate in one of those trainings, whether it's virtual or in person, definitely recommend that as a great place to start, because you'll get great content and meet great experts from their network, but you also get to meet shapers as well, which is again another opportunity. But in terms of my own background, yeah, I started as an engineer, like you mentioned in the beginning. Um, and I really started with materials and polymer science engineering, because I wanted to start with like where materials come from. Like we have to get everything from the earth around us. We're mining things, we're extracting things. So I really started at the beginning of that process with that degree. So I actually worked in sand mining for a couple of years,
Mhm.
um, and worked in like corporate sustainability and environmental products and processes. And then I went back for my PhD, which I'm still finishing now, hopefully soon, in biomimicry. So for those not familiar with that term, biomimicry is looking to nature first for inspirations to solutions for human design problems. The easiest example is like when you think of airplanes, a lot of times they look at bird wing design. That's a very easy example of biomimicry, but really biomimicry is more than just looking to nature to apply to a technical solution. It's really a mindset shift of, if you're looking to nature as mentor and model and teacher, you really should take care of nature and as a gift, as returning that favor of like, if I'm learning from nature and all the like 3.8 billion years of evolution that life has gone through, then really we should be conserving these ecosystems and these spaces so we can continue to learn from species and ecosystems and actually form what you could call like different relationships, like species dependent relationships, and really think beyond just, humans. So it's definitely a mindset shift that I think has taken, that's why you do a PhD in this, because it takes time to kind of shift your mental models into that space. And so my area has been in ecological restoration. So that's like restoring landscapes from degradation. So it could have been like from a former factory site, or it's just intense erosion from a storm event. And I focus on coastal restoration, but specifically for the Great Lakes. So the Great Lakes is one of the largest freshwater bodies in the world, but we also have erosion problems in our own climate impacts that are unique from oceans. So there's a lot of work going on in ocean restoration and coastal restoration and marine environments, but it doesn't necessarily translate to freshwater environments in the same way, primarily
Mhm.
because we don't have salt water. That's a big difference. And just the species makeup is different. So I focus on particular interventions that help with restoration of the coastline, which then in turn improves water quality as well as like addresses land use impacts. So it's looking at that transition zone between land and water, but using biomimicry. So like looking to nature for inspiration. And then I would say with Shapers, I've gotten into that environmental justice space. So because we intentionally partnered with Black environmental leaders as our fiscal sponsor, and they're really more than our fiscal sponsor, they're our advisory partner. They invite us to speaking engagements and leadership trainings because they really want to have youth at the table and young people at the table in these conversations, particularly BIPOC youth. So yeah, I mean, I've really gotten introduced to environmental justice from my journey as a shaper, which has really rounded out everything else I've been doing.
So, World Economic Forum's Ocean Action Agenda has recently launched a new initiative, the Blue Carbon Action Partnership, to help governments and business navigate untapped blue carbon resources and to restore coastal ecosystems. As I mentioned in introduction, Alina is an expert of this field, which combines coastal engineering, ecology, and biomimicry. Alina already shared the scope of this field. So, can you share some like insights about the what is the future of this field? Because
Yeah.
the blue carbon is like very new thing for the world.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's all these terms coming out in here, and it's really hard to keep track. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, ocean restoration and like cities along coast. I mean, there's a lot of work needing to be done there. I mean, I'm trying to remember the statistic that said like I think 40% of the world's population lives along a coastline, and that percentage will grow to approximately 60%, I believe, in 2050. So more and more people are moving to coasts. And you have to deal with storms and storm surges, whether it's hurricane, cyclone, what have you. And you have to protect that your city, but also there's the natural ecosystem that has evolved to adapt to those disturbances. And so using nature as quote unquote a form of technology, like understanding that nature inherently is a technological solution, it's just evolved over a longer time through trial and error and evolution. So working with nature as a form of technology is another way of thinking about biomimicry and keeping those, restoring those landscapes, rehabilitating those landscapes, conserving those landscapes to coexist with an urban environment is really important because if you think about um, like a hurricane coming through, you might want a couple lines of defense. You might not just want a giant like wall or like a concrete wall or some sort of engineering structure. Maybe you want a mangrove forest ahead of that. Maybe you want a sandbar. And so there's all these different points where, yes, the mangrove forest will suffer, but it will recover. Like 40% of it might go away and get washed out from a storm. But because of its root networks and how it's connected underground, it will restore itself. But it's a line of defense in a sense for the city. But it also provides all these other benefits, fisheries benefits, water quality benefits. It oxygenates the water. So like there's more to ecosystems than just being like a line of defense. There's just like multi-functionality built in that other species and humans can take part in. So I really think the hybrid biological engineering approach is moving forward in the global ocean restoration sphere. So looking to nature and technology like linked together. So like human technology and natural technology or biotechnology. So those sorts of hybrid approaches, I think, are becoming more and more common. And I think you're seeing some instance of just cities learning how to like live on water. So even like San Francisco, for instance, has been exploring like how houses and buildings can live on like floating docks. And so they're among the water. And then could you build a system where you pull the whole house or the whole development back during a storm, like back to protect it from that storm surge and allow just water to kind of flood the space, but you're not worrying about property damage. So yes, it's a big upfront cost, but it does help alleviate property damage further down the line and all those costs. So that's something we're seeing, is just like how to live with water or how to live on water. And you see this with indigenous communities across the world. They've been doing it for thousands of years. So now it's just adapting cities to do those things. And then I'd say some of it's just setbacks. So you're seeing policies where there's coastal setbacks, or what's called riparian setbacks along rivers, where it's like you just can't build up along the coast anymore. You need to be back, so far. Because again, you need coastlines shift with time. Water levels go up, you're going to have less of a coast. Water levels go down, you're going to have more of a coast. If you don't allow for that like space to evolve on its own organically with changing conditions, you are going to get like major erosion issues. You're going to get major infrastructure damage. So giving your like city and just space between like construction and allowing for like nature to thrive and do its thing in that transition zone, which is really important in general, because that's where a lot of that's a refuge species, or that's a refuge area for a lot of species. It's also a nursery like area. So a lot of fish and birds and amphibians will nurse their young in these transitional land, water, coastal spaces. And so it really improves that biodiversity as well. So again, it's just thinking about all the different layers of whatever action you take with nature is going to have these multifunctional benefits and repercussions if you take it away. And so you have to be thinking through that and how it's going to affect food cycles and ecosystem shifts. And I really think that is becoming more and more common. So I think it would be great if lots of engineers also knew ecology, like having that like balance. I think it's really important. So
Was like a very elaborate explanation of this field, and I hope a lot of shapers will get inspiration from your answer to work in this specific field.
I mean, I can talk about it all day. That's why I love it.
So we are almost at the end of our conversation. Elena, would you like to give any advice or suggestions to new shapers or hubs based on your extensive experience of over 6 years in the community?
Yes. So I would say take as many opportunities as you can to meet other shapers outside of your city. We have shapers because of when they joined and then the pandemic hit that have only really engaged with the Cleveland Hub, which is great. The Cleveland Hub is great, but you don't really get to see the impact or the power of the whole community. So if you can do that through, listening to podcasts like this, or joining WhatsApp groups, or joining, if that like again, that random shaper platform, like where you get paired with shapers and you get to meet shapers from across the world. You can also just on top link email your community champion or your community manager and say, I want to get more involved, because they're always looking for shapers to serve on groups and in councils. So I think just asking and getting involved and meeting people from outside your city is extremely important, because you realize how much we're dealing with the same issues. So how we really should be working together, but also how much we can learn from one another. And so I think that's really important. And if you can travel for regional events, like meetups or shape events or different conferences, that's another way to do it. But not everyone is like financially able to. So there's ways to do that virtually. And I just encourage like any young shaper to just like, while getting involved in their own community is important, and you should do that, like have a role like that. I think that's important for new shapers, is like participate in an existing project and have like a concrete role, or lead a project, or take on another leadership role. But to be connected with that broader community. And something else I would suggest to hubs in general is to do perhaps like a mentorship type program, where it's like a young shaper or someone that's just joined is paired with a shaper that's been around for several years in the hub. So they get together for coffee or tea, whatever, go on a hike once a month, just to like get to learn what this new shaper will bring and what their strengths are and what they want to do. And try to pair their interests, their professional and personal interests, with what's going on in the hub. And to be okay with making shifts. So we've been adding more and more members really interested in public health, and particularly addressing the health of Black women in our city. And so we've been thinking about shifting our some of our efforts. So again, closing out some of our climate environmental justice work, not to say that this isn't environmental justice in its own right, because it is, but to really address Black women health and vitality in the city of Cleveland, specifically in a project. So as you bring in shapers to realize it's good to pivot based on where people are and what they want to do. So yeah, that's something that we're doing currently. It's fun. That's why we want people to come to Cleveland, because we're ending some projects. We want people to celebrate with us. We're beginning new ones. So we want everyone to join in with us and come up with their own projects, and it'll be great. Come to Cleveland for Midwest Meetup. I'm just going to keep plugging that in.
So if I ask you, what are the like best moments of your journey as a global shaper? Can you share two, three of them?
Yeah. So I would say one of the earliest best moments I had was attending my first Midwest Meetup. It was in Chicago in 2018. So I didn't really know the shaper community all that well. I didn't know my own shapers all that well. I just joined like I don't know, it was a couple months in, and we drove 6 hours because it's a little bit easier to drive, and it's a very boring drive from Cleveland to Chicago. People will tell you it's very flat. There's lots of cornfields. Um, it's just, so I was just in the car with like people I didn't know that well. And so for 6 hours to go to Midwest Meetup and then 6 hours back. So that was really a great early memory of just like getting really close to some Cleveland shapers. Um, our former curator, Adam Dunn, who's now in California, and Kwame Bachwe, who's our Midwest community champion now. So I got to really know them very early on through this like road trip experience to Midwest Meetup. And it was sort of forced upon us. Like Adam was great about being like, no, you have to do this. I know you don't know anyone, but you have to do it. Like, this is the only way you're going to get involved in the community. And I was like, okay. Going to Jordan, of course, like I mentioned earlier, and hanging out with Saddam Saleh, who's the current curator of Amman, was amazing. Spending a week in Jordan and seeing the landscape and learning more about his work and what he does. So that was an amazing shaper memory that I really enjoyed. And then ACM this last year. So I'm the curator now, of course, because that was my first ACM, and it was back in Geneva, which was great. And just 2.5 days of intensity, both like starting super early with a bunch of content and then hanging out late in the night with shapers and making instant connections. And then I traveled throughout Europe a little bit after, so I got to meet shapers like along the way. So that was really fun to realize some shapers I just met at ACM were also in Vienna or also here. So those are some, I mean, I have lots more stories, but those are some immediate ones that come to mind of just great times with shapers.
So thank you so much, Elena, for joining us today and sharing your insights and expertise from your social and professional life. It was a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much, and I wish you all the best for the Midwest meetup at USA.
Thank you. And thank you again for having me. And yeah, I mean, people should feel free to message us. I'm sure you'll post all of our socials and emails in the chat. So if they have any questions for me or for our hub in general, they are welcome to connect with us. We would love to connect with more hubs. So thank you.